The leather seats of the customized Bentley felt like a vault. Safe, expensive, silent. I always preferred to drive myself, but today was different. Today, I was Elias Thorne, owner of the Thorne Hospitality Group, disguised as a temporary relief driver named simply Eli. I needed to see the raw edges of my own empire, the parts the vice president smoothed over with glossy reports and staged smiles. I needed to feel the cold shoulder of the staff, who thought I was just passing through. My father was a chauffeur for 40 years. He built a good life for us, but I watched the invisible walls people built around him, the slights, the casual disregard for his humanity. That memory, sharp and constant, was why I drove this car today. I wanted to protect the Elis of the world. The Thorn Crest in Manhattan was my flagship. 72 stories of polished marble and cold, intimidating wealth. I sat there, idling near the curb, wearing the plain black cap and jacket, waiting for the special client. He burst out of the revolving doors like a poorly controlled explosion. Marcus Sterling. I knew the name, of course. A venture capitalist known for his impatience and his deeply unpleasant public behavior. A platinum card holder, which meant he believed the hotel owed him the air he breathed. He didn't look at me, not once. He looked through me. He saw a uniform, a tool, a piece of the hotel's infrastructure designed solely to respond to his demands. He shoved a small custom-made leather briefcase toward the back window. "Airport, private terminal, now," he barked, his voice laced with the sort of aggressive entitlement that only decades of uninterrupted wealth can breed. I reached back slowly, carefully placing the briefcase on the rear seat floor, angled away from the pristine white leather. "Sir, for high-value items, we recommend placing them on the seat beside you for immediate visual access," I said, my voice low and professional. I was testing him, testing the system. He froze. His head snapped forward, finally focusing on me. But still, he saw only the uniform, the low-status distraction. His face was already flushed, whether from the cold or from simple anger at having his instruction questioned, I couldn't tell. "Did you just tell me how to handle my luggage, driver?" he asked. The word driver tasted like spit in his mouth. "I'm simply observing the security protocols, sir. It's a very high-end bag," I confirmed. I had seen the watch on his wrist. I knew the value of the contents. But more importantly, I knew the hotel liability policy, which I, Elias Thorne, had personally written. He didn't care about liability. He cared about obedience. "You observe the protocol of shutting up and driving," Sterling spat. He leaned forward, crossing the invisible boundary between guest and service provider. His expensive suit smelled heavily of a custom cologne designed to impress. I nodded curtly, my hands gripping the wheel. The anger was a slow burn, not yet igniting. I was still Eli, the professional. "Understood, sir," I said, putting the car into gear. The car moved maybe 6 feet before Sterling exploded again. Wait, you imbecile! I forgot my phone!" He fumbled with the door handle, clearly frustrated that I hadn't read his mind. He was searching his pockets frantically. "Driver, where is my phone?" he yelled. I knew he hadn't placed it in the back seat. I had seen it clearly clipped to his belt when he entered the car. But I didn't interrupt the frenzy. "I saw a device clipped to your trouser pocket when you entered, sir. Perhaps checking there?" I suggested calmly, maintaining the role. He stopped fumbling, his eyes narrowing to slits of pure contempt. That calm suggestion, that gentle push toward reality, was taken as the ultimate insult. In his mind, I had just implied he was incompetent. A low-status man had corrected a high-status man. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then he reached across the console. It was too fast for me to react fully, even with my heightened awareness. A sharp, stinging smack landed squarely on the side of my face, near my ear. It was more contemptuous flick than a true punch, but the sound echoed in the expensive, muffled silence of the cabin. The world went momentarily quiet. The scent of the leather, the sound of the traffic outside, all disappeared, replaced by a dull, throbbing numbness. The slap wasn't just physical, it was history. It was the echo of every time my father was dismissed, every time he was called boy, every time someone assumed his worth based solely on the uniform he wore. My body tensed. My hands were vibrating on the steering wheel. I could feel the blood rising to my neck and ears. Sterling, now breathing heavily, didn't even flinch. He adjusted his cufflink, already dismissing the violence he had just committed as a trivial inconvenience, a justified reaction to perceived insolence. "You are paid to drive, not to lecture me, Eli," he sneered, using the assumed name like a weapon. "Now, get me to the airport, and if you speak to me again, unless I ask you a direct question, you will be reported. I will see to it that you never drive for this hotel or any hotel in New York ever again." He settled back into the seat, arrogant and satisfied. He truly believed he had won. He believed I was powerless. He was wrong. So deeply, profoundly wrong. My jaw felt tight. I took one long, slow breath, letting the mask of Eli fall away, piece by painful piece. I didn't move the car. The traffic horn sounded faintly across the avenue, but I ignored it. I reached up and very deliberately removed the black cap. I placed it gently on the dashboard. Then I pulled off the thin, discreet driving gloves. The name Elias Thorne was not just a title. It was a fortress built brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. And this man had just breached the outer defenses, attacking the memory of my life's struggle. I turned my head just enough so he could see the slight redness blooming on my cheek. My eyes met his in the rearview mirror, a gaze that held neither fear nor subservience, only a cold, measured authority. Sterling frowned, confused by the delay. "What are you doing?" "Drive," he commanded. I didn't answer him. I reached slowly into the inside pocket of the black jacket I wore and retrieved my personal phone. It was heavy, titanium, distinctly different from the company-issued device the drivers carried. I unlocked it with a practiced swipe and navigated directly to a single contact, Chief Operating Officer. The call connected instantly. Sterling watched this whole process with increasing impatience. "Who are you calling? You're wasting my time. Is this some union nonsense? I'll have you fired on the spot." I lifted a finger slightly toward him, a gesture that immediately shut down his rant, not because he respected me, but because the sheer, sudden shift in my demeanor implied something dangerous. I brought the phone to my ear, my voice flat, devoid of the professional warmth of Eli. "Sarah, it's Elias. Listen carefully. I need you to initiate a full immediate termination of service and residency for Marcus Sterling, guest 4001, in the penthouse suite," I stated clearly. On the other end, Sarah, the hyper-efficient COO, who knew better than anyone my incognito habits, did not pause or question. She had been with me for 15 years. She knew the tone. "Termination code?" she asked instantly. "Code 73. Immediate revocation of platinum status and all associated privileges across the entire Thorne Hospitality Group portfolio worldwide," I specified. Code 73 meant personal physical security breach or assault against staff or ownership. It was irreversible. Sterling, hearing his name and the sudden, chilling mention of the penthouse suite and platinum status, sat up straighter. His eyes flickered nervously, the arrogance beginning to fracture. He was trying to reconcile the driver in front of him with the voice issuing corporate commands he shouldn't know. "What are you doing? I need to catch a flight. This is ridiculous. I'm reporting you, he sputtered, his voice cracking slightly. I ignored him entirely, focusing on Sarah. Furthermore, Sarah, I want a complete block on all future booking attempts, personally flagged through our global system. We will absorb the cancellation fee on his prepaid flight, but I want him removed from the property perimeter within 30 minutes. Legal should send a formal notice to his firm explaining the breach of conduct clauses this evening. No exceptions, no negotiation. Understood, Elias? Initiating protocols now? Should I dispatch security to the vehicle? Sarah asked. I glanced back at Sterling, who was now breathing quickly, realization dawning in his eyes, slow and horrifying. No, Sarah, that won't be necessary, I replied, my gaze holding Sterling's terrified reflection in the rearview mirror. I'll handle the immediate extraction myself. I ended the call, lowering the titanium phone slowly. The silence in the car was crushing. Sterling leaned forward again. But this time, the entitled fire was gone, replaced by frantic disbelief. Thorn, Thorn, as in Elias. Thorn, the owner. But the driver's jacket, the cap, he stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the dashboard. I turned fully toward him, the faint sting on my cheek a reminder. My composure was absolute. Yes, Mr. Sterling, the jacket and the cap are simply a uniform, I said quietly, just as that platinum card, which you no longer possess, was simply a privilege, a temporary key to my front door. I unbuckled my seat belt. It was time to deal with the guest who had just slapped the black driver, the man who had mistaken me for an inconvenience instead of the foundation beneath his own fragile wealth. Now, I said, opening the door and stepping out onto the cold Manhattan street, I believe we need to discuss your immediate checkout procedures. You have 30 minutes to leave the premises of the Thorn Crest, and I assure you, Mr. Sterling, those 3 minutes, the minutes since you raised your hand to me, have been the most expensive of your life. I walked around the hood of the Bentley, opened his door, and waited for the man who was about to lose everything he valued most. The true performance, the reversal, was just beginning. Sterling's face was ash. He swallowed hard, staring at me, still unable to move, unable to compute the destruction he had just self-inflicted. He saw not a driver, but the looming shadow of the man who owned the sky above him. End of part 1. The sudden silence was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The sound of his hand connecting with my face had already dissolved, but the silence, it settled in the car like deep snow. It was heavy, cold, and absolute. I didn't move. I didn't reach up to touch the stinging area of my cheek. To react physically would be to give him what he wanted: conflict, justification. To react violently would be to fulfill every stereotype he already held about me. I held my breath and focused only on the temperature of the leather steering wheel. He mistook my stillness for fear, or perhaps acceptance. Marcus Thorne cleared his throat, adjusting the platinum cufflink on his left wrist. He didn't even look at me. I hate when low-paid help makes things complicated, he muttered dismissively. You are here to serve, not to question the route. He leaned back, satisfied that the matter was settled, that his authority was unquestionable. He did not know he had just struck a federal board member, a major stakeholder in 4 global investment banks, and the sole owner of the entire multinational hospitality group he was about to check into. He had hit the wrong man, on the wrong day, in the wrong car, but his ego was an impenetrable fortress. Now, he continued sharp and dry, we are wasting time. Are we there yet? I need the presidential suite prepared immediately. I expect the Dom Perignon to be chilling. I shifted the gears. My hands were perfectly steady. The trembling was deep inside my chest, where the cold rage was starting to crystallize. I realized the feeling was not pain, but a profound sense of historical déjà vu. This casual dehumanization, the assumption that my body, my dignity, was disposable because of the color of my skin and the uniform I wore. My mother's voice, quiet and firm, echoed in the silent cabin. Kian, sometimes the biggest battles are won not with noise, but with absolute stillness. I reached the decision in that split second. The price for that slap would not be a mere inconvenience. It would be total, catastrophic financial and social demolition. I would make sure he never stood on stable ground again. We turned the final corner, and then she rose before us. The Aurora, my flagship property in the city. Glass, steel, and light, reaching 70 stories into the sky. It was magnificent, a monument to decades of relentless silent work. I pulled the custom vehicle slowly up the curved drive, stopping precisely at the main entrance where the brass button doorman waited. Thorn grinned, basking in the reflected glory of the establishment he assumed was eager to serve him. Finally, took you long enough, driver. Now get out, get the bags, move it. He already had his hand on the door handle, ready to step onto my polished marble, but I remained seated. The engine idled quietly. Thorn turned, irritation flashing across his face. "What is your problem now? Did you not hear me?" I said. He stopped, mid-sentence, because I finally moved. I did not move toward the door or toward his luggage. I reached for the small, highly sophisticated communications panel built flush into the driver's side dashboard. It was disguised as part of the stereo system. I activated the hidden mic, pressing the code that connected me directly to the hotel's chief of security, Mr. Elias Vance. Vance was standing 10 feet away, observing the car. He looked stern and professional, waiting for the signal that the VIP had arrived. I spoke calmly, my voice low, a deep rumble that only Thorn, sitting inches away, could barely hear. "Elias, it's Kian. We have an immediate situation. I need you to secure the main lobby and verify the location of my head of legal affairs, Miss Anya Sharma. She is to report to the presidential suite reception desk immediately." Thorn blinked. He looked around the vast, opulent lobby, slightly confused, still assuming I was talking to myself or perhaps a dispatcher. "What the hell are you mumbling about, chauffeur? Get out of the car. Now." He reached across the console to grab my shoulder. My eyes met his. And this time, there was no deference, no subservience. I gently pushed his hand away with the lightest touch. I reached for the small magnetic logo that sat clipped to the breast pocket of the navy blue uniform jacket I wore as my disguise. I pulled it off, revealing the custom embroidery beneath, the initials K above a single quiet crest. Then, very slowly, I took off the chauffeur cap. I looked at Marcus Thorn, who was beginning to realize that the vehicle was unusually soundproofed. The interior was far too custom, and the person he had just assaulted did not look like hired help anymore. His eyes widened slightly as he processed the calm confidence radiating from me, the absolute certainty of power. I raised my voice just enough to carry over the idling engine, ensuring Vance could hear the next command clearly through the external microphone I knew was active. "Also, Elias, I need you to hold the guest arriving in this vehicle, Marcus Thorn. He is no longer welcome in this establishment. I want all his reservations, here and across the entire Aurora Group portfolio, cancelled immediately, effective this moment." Thorn gaped, frozen, the reality of my identity finally starting to dawn on him in a sick, cold rush. "And Elias," I added, my voice dropping back to the pure, quiet steel I used only in the boardroom. "I need the police here. He just committed battery on the owner of the premises." I looked at the man who had just slapped me. He was pale, sickly white. "Welcome. I said softly, finally stepping out of the car and onto the pristine marble of the hotel lobby I owned. To my Aurora. I did not wait for his answer. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the weight of the moment lift. The game was over for him, but it was just beginning for me. I walked toward Elias Vance, who was already signaling his team into motion. Anya Sharma was already on her way up. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. But first, I needed to know how deep this man's arrogance truly ran. I needed the recording, the whole story, and I needed it fast. I glanced back at Thorne, still trapped in the back seat, staring in horror at the entrance of the hotel he would never walk through again. I had a hotel to run and a massive deal to cancel. The sound that followed was not the crunch of gravel or the slam of a door. It was the flat, wet sound of skin against bone. My head snapped sideways. The immediate pain was sharp, but it quickly dissolved into a deeper, colder shock. It was the shock of utter, absolute violation. Mr. Sterling stood there, breathing heavily, his face red, a grotesque mask of fury and sudden exertion. He had struck me. He had used his hand, his privilege, his rage, to physically impose his will on a uniformed man he perceived as nothing. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. "Did you hear me, boy?" he hissed, his voice trembling slightly. "When I ask you to move your foot, you move your foot. You do not question my urgency." That word, boy. It was an ancient trigger, a historical insult designed to diminish every inch of my being. My body remained perfectly still. I felt the familiar, dangerous rush of heat behind my eyes. I was not reacting as Darius King, billionaire owner. I was reacting as Darius King, a black man who had just been treated like a subservient object in 2024. For a terrifying fraction of a second, the mission was forgotten. I wanted to move. I wanted to react to the slap, not as an executive, but as a man defending his dignity. But then, the cold steel of my training took over. I remembered Grandfather Ezra's voice, rough and steady, from years spent facing worse indignities. "They want you to scream, Darius. They want the rage. If you scream, they win, because they get to call you the aggressive one. Be the steel, be silent, and then shatter their world." I swallowed, the metallic taste of adrenaline rising. Mr. Sterling mistook my stillness for fear, or perhaps the days of low-wage compliance. He adjusted his jacket, clearly believing the altercation was settled and his dominance reaffirmed. "Now, are you going to get the door, or must I report you for dereliction of duty and assault?" he demanded, pointing toward the hotel entrance. I did not move toward the door. I reached into the breast pocket of the dark wool uniform jacket. It was a standard tailored driver's uniform, but this one had a crucial proprietary detail. Hidden inside the lining was my corporate identification. I pulled out the card. It was not the standard employee badge. It was heavy, obsidian black, micro-etched with silver filigree. The key card used only by the very top tier of Ascendant Global. It was biometric, tied to every system in the chain. It bore my face, my full name, Darius King, and beneath the photo, the title, Chairman and Founder. Sterling's eyes flickered down to the card, but his brain couldn't process the weight of the platinum metal against the inexpensive driver's cloth. "What is that?" he scoffed, waving his hand impatiently. "A membership card? Are you going to bore me with policy? I'm late." "I am not going to bore you with policy, Mr. Sterling," I said. My voice was low, absolutely calm, devoid of the rage that was boiling beneath the surface. The calmness was worse than any shout. It signaled control. "I am going to bore you with ownership." I lifted my hand slightly higher, touching the discreet, custom-made Bluetooth earpiece hidden just beneath the brim of my cap. "Executive Channel 9, I instructed. My voice was amplified, instantly overriding the general staff communication frequencies. The command carried the unmistakable authority of the man who signs every paycheck. Code red. Immediate activation. Location is the main drive, outside the Sterling Grand entrance. I require Security Chief Miller and the General Manager, Mr. Chen, on site. Now. The response was instantaneous, filtered through my earpiece. A sharp, nervous confirmation from the control room, hundreds of miles away. Mr. Sterling finally registered the shift in power dynamics. His arrogance faltered, replaced by genuine confusion. "Who are you talking to?" he stammered. "What is code red? Are you calling the police on me?" I looked at him, letting him drown in the silence for a moment. "You had an assumption, Mr. Sterling," I began, my gaze steady. "You assumed that the man driving the car was an easily replaced component of the system. You assumed that the uniform meant the man was low status, disposable, and unworthy of basic human respect." I took a slow step closer. He instinctively took a step back. "I wore this uniform today, specifically for this purpose, to check the integrity of my organization, to see how my staff was treated when they were perceived to have no voice. I came looking for friction points in the service model." My eyes held his. The illusion of the driver was completely gone. I was the chairman now, cold, meticulous, and judging. "I did not anticipate finding you," I continued softly. "You are the worst friction point of all, Mr. Sterling. You are entitlement weaponized." His face paled slightly as the reality began to seep in. He looked around wildly, seeing the uniformed attendants across the drive suddenly freeze, sensing the gravity of the silent confrontation. "I don't know what you are playing at," he managed, his voice thin. "I have a reservation. The presidential suite. I am an important guest. I know the owner of this chain." "You know the name of the hotel," I corrected him sharply. "You do not know the owner. I am the owner, Mr. Sterling." I gestured to the spot on my cheek where his hand had landed barely 60 seconds prior. "You physically assaulted an employee of this corporation moments ago, an employee who happens to be the founder and chief architect of this entire global brand." The gravity of the situation hit him like a physical blow. He swayed slightly, processing the monumental, catastrophic error he had just committed. The wealthy guest who believed he could abuse the help had just struck the man who signed the deeds. "You see, Mr. Sterling," I finished, my voice dropping back to that unnervingly calm tone. "We have camera feeds everywhere. Security footage has captured every moment of your aggression, your language, and your physical assault." I raised my wrist to check the time on the bespoke watch hidden beneath the cuff of the driver's jacket. "You checked into the Sterling Grand for 2 weeks. That reservation is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Your corporate relationship with Ascendant Global is officially concluded." I paused, delivering the final quiet sentence that sealed his fate. "You have 3 minutes before your key card to the presidential suite is deactivated and your luggage is delivered to the curb. I suggest you retrieve whatever irreplaceable items you value now. Your time starts now." The ringing was louder than the city traffic. It wasn't just the sting on my cheek. It was the absolute, casual dismissal of my humanity. The world seemed to wobble for a moment. I stared straight ahead at the monolithic glass tower that dominated the skyline, the Meridian sky, my hotel. I could feel the heat rising in my neck, but I kept my hands steady on the wheel. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I let him believe he had broken me. I inhaled the stale, recycled air of the cabin. He misinterpreted my silence. He thought my stillness was submission. He took it as a confirmation that he held all the power, and I, the driver, held none. He reached for the door handle. "Well, aren't you going to get the baggage, chauffeur?" he barked, his voice laced with the self-satisfaction of a man who just successfully humiliated an inferior. I looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His face was a mask of entitled triumph. He fixed his silk tie, completely unconcerned with the violence he had just committed. "Move it," he commanded. I opened my door slowly. Every motion was deliberate. My muscles were tight, locked down, containing a force that could level this parking strip. I walked to the trunk. My cheek throbbed, a steady, furious pulse beneath my skin. I remembered the lessons my grandfather gave me about farming in the South. You never pull a weed until you see the root. If you pull too soon, it just grows back stronger. Bryce was a weed, deeply rooted in the soil of generational privilege and careless bigotry. I needed to see his roots, see his arrogance play out fully in the environment he believed belonged to him. I pulled out his absurdly heavy designer luggage, 4 pieces, and placed them gently on the curb. He strode past me, not even making eye contact, already calling out for a bellhop, demanding attention from the liveried staff waiting by the spinning doors. "Someone get this luggage inside and tell the concierge I need my suite prepped immediately. The long flight has exhausted me, and frankly, the car service was atrocious." He sailed into the lobby, a whirlwind of cashmere and bad manners. I followed him. The scent of ozone and expensive flowers hit me as I stepped inside my flagship lobby. The lobby was a cathedral of steel and marble, a silent testament to decades of sacrifice, risk, and relentless work. Every square foot of this building belonged to me. The very air he breathed here was sustained by my investment. And yet, here I was, hat in hand, playing the hired help. I watched as the staff, my employees, reacted instantly to his high-pitched demands. They were trained for this, trained to maintain the illusion of seamless luxury for even the most demanding guests. Bryce was leaning over the mahogany registration desk, speaking loudly to Amelia, the head concierge, who was usually unflappable. Even Amelia looked strained. He was oblivious to the atmosphere he created. I stood back, near the enormous water feature, the sound of the cascading water muffling my breathing. I straightened my bespoke driving gloves, the leather feeling impossibly thin. My mind was running complex equations, not just emotional cost, but monetary leverage, share price impact, reputational exposure, legal consequences. If I revealed myself now, it would be quick, clean, but he deserved the slow, agonizing realization of his error. He deserved to see the entire edifice of his comfortable reality crumble around him. He was finishing his check-in rant. "And tell that driver, the one in the pathetic sedan, that he is receiving no gratuity, absolutely none. He was slow, clumsy, and he actually dared to question my itinerary." Bryce stabbed his finger toward the lobby entrance, generally indicating my direction. My heart didn't beat faster. It just seized, frozen, turning to ice. He wasn't content with the physical assault. He needed the final public act of humiliation. He needed to ensure I understood my place in the financial hierarchy by robbing me of the $5 he assumed was my only salary. Amelia's eyes flickered toward me. She saw the quiet man in the chauffeur uniform. She offered a small, apologetic nod of solidarity, thinking I was just a contractor taking an undeserved verbal beating. She had no idea she was looking at the chairman of the board. Bryce didn't wait for her response. He picked up his key card, smiled broadly, a viper's grin, and prepared to head toward the elevators, ready to enjoy the luxury I paid for. "Make sure that situation is handled, Amelia. I expect perfection during my stay here." He turned, taking a single confident step toward the gilded elevator bank. I knew the calculus was complete. The roots were exposed. This was the exact second the storm had to break. I took one step forward, my voice cutting through the soft murmur of the lobby. It wasn't loud. It was clear, low, and resonant. "Excuse me, sir?" Bryce stopped mid-stride. He turned slowly, annoyed that the help was interrupting his grand entrance. He didn't even recognize the voice belonged to the man he had just struck. He looked me up and down with total contempt. "What is it, driver? I told the concierge to handle your pathetic tip." I didn't smile. I didn't raise my voice. I simply let the facade drop, layer by layer, starting with the uniform. I reached up and, with a swift, decisive motion, pulled off the driver's cap. My hair, usually neatly concealed for the role, fell slightly around my temples. The entire lobby went silent. Bryce still looked bored, irritated. I met his gaze, my eyes cold and steady. "You won't be needing that tip, Mr. Bryce," I stated, "because you won't be staying here." He laughed. A short, sharp burst of superior derision. "Pardon me? What ridiculous authority do you think you have, boy?" I took another step closer, placing the driver's cap on the marble countertop of the registration desk, right next to Amelia's startled face. "The kind of authority, Mr. Bryce, that allows me to tell you that, effective 3 minutes ago, your reservation and your tenancy in this specific building has been permanently terminated." His smug smile vanished, but the arrogance remained, twisting his features into confusion and rage. "You, a hired driver, are telling me I can't stay in a hotel I paid 5 figures for tonight?" he sputtered. "I will have your job. I will have you arrested for trespassing." I looked over his shoulder, locking eyes with Amelia, who was now staring at me with the dawning realization of who I truly was. The way I wore the bespoke suit beneath the uniform was undeniable. I gave Amelia a subtle nod, a command. She immediately reached under the counter for the hotel's secure line. She knew what to do. I returned my attention to Bryce, the man who had just slapped the chairman of the board of the Meridian Group. "You seem to misunderstand the ownership structure here, Mr. Bryce," I explained calmly. "I am not trespassing. You are. And as for your room," I continued, lifting my hand and gesturing vaguely toward the towering $100 million structure that served as his temporary shelter, "don't worry, the room is still available." I paused, letting the silence lengthen, thick and poisonous between us. "I am just selling the entire hotel chain out from under you, starting right now." The sound of the slap was gone, but the echo stayed. It hung heavy in the pristine air of my own lobby. I felt the sharp sting, not just on my cheek. It was the sting of immediate, casual assumption, the weight of his certainty. He saw the suit. He saw the color of my skin. He made his choice. Clay was breathing hard. He didn't look guilty. He looked profoundly satisfied. I said, "Get the luggage inside, and don't touch my bags like that again, you incompetent fool." He had already dismissed the assault. To him, it was merely a necessary corrective for a tool that malfunctioned. I kept my hands perfectly steady. I looked past him, up at the magnificent 3-story glass dome of the apex. I built this. Every tile, every light, every policy was my design. And now, this man had just defiled my entrance with violence and contempt. He had defiled me. I reached up slowly, my fingers wrapped around the brim of the chauffeur's cap. It was good heavy wool, a comfortable, familiar disguise. I pulled it off. My hair was neatly clipped. Then the gloves, pure white cotton, clean. I placed them neatly on the plush driver's seat. I finally looked back at Clay. "The luggage can wait, Mr. Clay," I said. My voice was low, calmer than I felt I had any right to be. Clay laughed, a high, irritating bark. "Wait? You're telling me to wait? You're fired. Julian, security, get this insolent man away from the car and make sure he never works for any other establishment in the city." Julian, my head of security and operations, moved forward instantly. He stopped slightly behind me. A solid, silent guard. Clay didn't notice. He was too consumed by his own righteous power. "Mr. Clay," I repeated. I took a deliberate step closer, reducing the intimidating space he had created. "My name is not Julian, and you won't be firing anyone today." His face started to twitch. Confusion was beginning to puncture his arrogance. "What is this? A joke? Get in your car. Driver, before I call the actual owner and tell him what kind of garbage he hires." I smiled then. It was a cold, tight expression that didn't reach my eyes. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Clay. The actual owner is already here." The lobby went silent for the second time. A deep, heavy silence that carried weight. The staff, the porters, the receptionists, the cleaning crew had all frozen. They knew. They always knew the shift in my tone. Clay stared at me. His expensive Italian suit suddenly looked cheap under the relentless glare of the Apex lights. You think you can pull this pathetic bluff?" he spat. "You think a uniform makes you a contender?" I reached into the inner breast pocket of the chauffeur jacket. I pulled out a small, heavy silver key card. It wasn't a standard guest key. It was the MasterCard to the executive penthouse suite, engraved with the Apex logo and my signature. "This is Unit 4201, Mr. Clay," I said, holding the silver aloft. "The Apex penthouse. My private residence for the last 3 years. I designed the kitchen myself." I paused, letting the statement hang. "I am Darius Vance. I own the Vance Hotel Group. And you, Mr. Clay, are currently standing on my property." The color drained from his face entirely. He looked wildly at Julian, then at the shocked faces of the staff, searching for a shared joke. He tried to rally. "This is insane. You were driving the car." "Yes," I confirmed simply. "I was driving my car. I often check operational standards personally. I check the tires, I check the mood of the city, I also drive important guests, sometimes." "But the deal?" Clay stammered, his bravado crumbling into pure panic. "The takeover agreement is signed for tomorrow. I have a meeting with the owner of Apex." "You had a meeting," I corrected him smoothly. I turned slightly to Julian. My professional voice was back, sharp and decisive. "Julian, effective immediately, Mr. Clay's entire reservation is terminated. All associated services are terminated. His card on file is to be declined for any incidental charges." Julian didn't hesitate. "Yes, Mr. Vance, immediately." Clay lunged forward, his panic boiling into a messy rage. "You can't do that. I'm a high-value client. My company is essential to the local market. You'll face severe legal action." Took a precise step back, allowing Julian to place a large, firm hand squarely on Clay's chest. "You may call your lawyers, Mr. Clay. I suggest you start with the ones who handle assault charges and corporate misconduct," I stated. My eyes narrowed. "You physically struck an employee, or whom you thought was an employee, on the premises. That is grounds for immediate expulsion and the forfeiture of all deposits, as per Section 7 of the Apex Guest Policy, which I wrote, drafted, and signed into law." He was sweating now. His expensive tie was suddenly strangling him. "My bags, my data, my briefcase is in the room. Julian will arrange for your personal effects to be collected, carefully bagged, and placed on the curb outside the service entrance," I instructed. "I want nothing that has touched your hands remaining inside my hotel longer than necessary." I watched him struggle against Julian's measured grip. The powerful buyer, the aggressive negotiator, was reduced instantly to a common aggressor being escorted toward the doors. He was sputtering denials, threats, and finally, a pathetic plea. "Vance, wait. I'm sorry. I genuinely thought you were just the driver. It was a misunderstanding." The words echoed. "Just the driver." the casual, absolute degradation, the implied hierarchy that justified the hit. I didn't let the anger show. I let the disappointment harden my face. I heard you, Mr. Clay. That is precisely why we are here. I turned my back on the commotion and walked toward the reception desk. I leaned my elbows on the smooth granite counter. I needed to execute the next move. The business move. I spoke softly to the astonished head of reservations, ensuring only she heard the severity of the order. Cancel the morning meeting with Clay's holding group. Notify their corporate office immediately that negotiations regarding the acquisition of the San Diego properties are officially and permanently off the table. The reservation manager swallowed hard. Permanently, Mr. Vance? Permanently, I confirmed. And issue a memo to all Vance properties globally. Clay Global Holdings is now a restricted client. They are not to be accommodated at any price, under any name, for the foreseeable future. I watched them finally drag Clay through the service door, avoiding the main exit, sparing him the final humiliation of facing a crowd of onlookers. He was still yelling about money, yelling about respect. He still didn't understand the real cost of disrespecting the person he thought was powerless. He had lost far more than a hotel room. He had lost a fortune, and he had lost his future, standing in a very small, very elite world. Julian returned, rubbing his hands together. He is off the premises, Mr. Vance. The vehicle has been secured. Thank you, Julian, I said. Now, I need you to print out every single piece of correspondence regarding Clay's company for the last 6 months. Everything he demanded, every quote he lowballed. Bring it all to my office. Julian nodded once. He understood the deeper implication. This wasn't just about an eviction. It was about leverage and control. Clay thought he was fighting a driver. He was fighting the CEO who knew exactly where all his corporate bodies were buried. The slap was merely the introduction. The termination of his multi-million-dollar deal was the first soft punchback. The real work, the deliberate dismantling of his reputation and financial standing, was just beginning. I looked down at my hand. My palm still tingled from the vibration of the hit. I walked toward the private elevator. I needed silence. I needed to think about the next systematic step in the destruction of Clay Global Holdings. This entire incident had been captured on multiple high-definition security cameras. The footage needed to be secured and reviewed by my legal team immediately. The evening was only just starting, and I had a long, detailed night of precise, unavoidable work ahead. The silence in the lobby wasn't silence. It was the sound of 100 futures collapsing. Victor's future, primarily. The moment the security team gently but firmly guided him toward the service elevator, I made the calls. Fast and targeted. I didn't just want him removed from my premises. I wanted him removed from the financial ecosystem that sustained him. I called my chief operating officer first. He was hosting a major investor retreat in Geneva. Pull the plug on the Phoenix deal, Jeremy, I instructed. The Phoenix deal was Victor's passion project. Years of his life tied up in that financing. But Mr. Vance, the margins are huge, Jeremy started. The margins are irrelevant, Jeremy. The man assaulted me on my property. He used racial slurs. Consider all ties severed, effective immediately. Jeremy didn't argue further. He knew my rules. Dignity is non-negotiable. Profit comes second to respect. Next, I dialed legal. Clarissa, my head of global counsel, answered on the first ring. It was 3 a.m. in New York, but she was always awake. Clarissa, prepare the termination documents for the entire Vance Holdings partnership portfolio, I said. That portfolio was worth 9 figures. Grounds? She asked, voice sharp and steady. Physical assault and documented racial hostility against the owner. We have 4K footage and a dozen witnesses. I want a restraining order filed by dawn, keeping him 50 feet from any property we own, globally. I paused, rubbing the spot on my cheek where his hand had landed. The heat of the sting still lingered. A phantom insult. And that hotel he was so eager to criticize? The one I should sell, apparently, I continued. We are putting out a press release detailing how an internal investigation revealed a pattern of gross misconduct by a major partner, resulting in the immediate divestiture of all shared assets. Use the words moral turpitude. I wasn't going to sell the hotel. I was going to sell his future, piece by piece, using the hotel as the symbol of his downfall. The ability to destroy a life with a phone call is not a power I asked for. It is a necessary shield in a world that assumes I belong behind a wheel, not behind a desk. I walked up to the penthouse suite, past the shocked general manager, who still looked like he might pass out. I didn't acknowledge him. I needed solitude. I stepped onto my private balcony, overlooking the shimmering skyline of the city Victor thought he ruled. The air was cool, but the fire inside was not yet banked. Victor had seen a black man in a uniform. That was all. Not a CEO, not a philanthropist, just a commodity, easily disposable, easily slapped. I thought about the first time this happened. I was 22, interning at a major investment bank. I wore the same tailored suits as everyone else, but when the senior partner needed coffee, he always found me, standing amidst the 20 white interns. Boy, fetch me a latte. He never used my name. He only saw the color. He only saw the stereotype he needed. That early lesson shaped me. If they will never see you, you must become undeniable. You must become the ground they stand on. I spent decades building an empire that was invisible by design. I kept my face off the covers, my identity shielded. I moved through the world testing assumptions. Sometimes testing those assumptions cost me a slap, but it always cost the assailant far more. Because when they hit the driver, they hit the foundation. The victory felt hollow, metallic. Justice, when served so coldly, leaves a taste like ash. My security detail arrived, concerned about the physical incident. I waved them off. The physical pain was nothing. The emotional exhaustion of having to prove my humanity, yet again, was the true injury. Every act of discrimination, even when avenged, takes a tiny piece of the soul. Victor's downfall was assured. His name would be mud in high finance by morning. But I needed more than just his professional annihilation. I needed a message sent to everyone else watching that this behavior, this casual cruelty based on assumed hierarchy, would not be tolerated in any sphere I controlled. I looked at the city, plotting my next move. The press release was fine, but too corporate. This required something personal, something that showed the world what truly happens when you slap the wrong driver. I reached for my personal secure phone, the one reserved for my closest advisors, and started drafting a statement. A statement that didn't just mention the termination, but detailed the exact nature of the assault. I was done being the silent giant. The world needed to see Victor's face as clearly as he had seen the color of mine. I would turn this humiliation into a public monument to accountability. The cameras would roll. The truth would air. It was time to make sure that everyone knew my face, and that everyone knew what a slap truly costs. The silence after the security detail closed the door felt heavy. The air conditioning hummed, but the room was suddenly cold. I was no longer the chauffeur. I was Khalil. I looked at Sarah, my head of operations. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a fierce respect. She knew this was not just about a slap. It was about everything we had built. "Call legal, Sarah," I instructed. My voice was low, steady. "I want immediate termination of every contract where Sterling and Sons is the primary vendor or beneficiary." Sterling wasn't just a guest. He was a major contractor bidding on our new Chicago expansion, a deal worth almost $200 million. a deal that would define his family's next decade. He thought he was humiliating a driver, begging for a $5 tip. He was actually signing the termination papers of his own legacy. I moved to the large mahogany desk, my fingers already flying across the screen of my secure laptop. I didn't need meetings. I needed actions, irrevocable actions. I opened the dossier, titled Project Athena. The Sterling contract. Clean, clinical language outlining every penalty clause for breach of conduct, moral turpitude, and contractual non-performance. We hadn't defined moral turpitude narrowly. Hitting an employee, perceived or actual, fell neatly into Section 4, subsection B, immediate cancellation without recourse. My chief counsel, Mr. Desai, called within 5 minutes. He was usually slow, deliberate. Today, he was frantic. Mr. Khalil, are you sure? 200 million? The penalties are immense on their side. I am completely sure, Mr. Desai. Draft the cancellation notice. Deliver it in person to his corporate headquarters within the hour. No email, no phone call. A physical package. I want him to sign receipt. And the reason for termination? Desai asked softly. Breach of the morality clause. Assault on hotel property, I dictated. But make sure the public narrative is cleaner. State only that, due to unavoidable internal policy conflicts, the contract cannot proceed. Let the whispers handle the rest. I wasn't interested in making Sterling a martyr. I was interested in making him irrelevant. The financial dominoes began to fall immediately. Sterling had leveraged his bid for Project Athena to secure a massive line of credit from Union Trust. That credit was predicated entirely on the Athena contract being active. By 4 p.m., Union Trust had received the formal cancellation notice. By 4:15 p.m., Sterling's collateral was called. Margin calls began screaming across the market floor. He had borrowed heavily against his future revenue, trusting the contract was secure. Now, the future was zero. He had built his wealth, his arrogance, his entire self-worth on paper agreements and perceived status. I watched as that paper agreement vaporized. The feeling was complex. It wasn't glee. It was a cold satisfaction, the sound of a necessary surgical cut. Justice served not through shouting or violence, but through the calm, absolute power of capital. My phone rang continuously. It was Sterling. I let it ring. Then I blocked the number. He tried calling Sarah. She redirected him to Desai. Desai delivered the message. Mr. Sterling, you are no longer a client, a partner, or a guest of the Amethyst Group. Further communication will be handled by our litigation team regarding your outstanding debt and the assault charge. The realization must have hit him like a physical blow. The 200 million wasn't just lost income. It was active, immediate debt. He hadn't just lost the deal. He had lost the foundation of his company. The irony was beautiful in its cruelty. The hotel he had insulted, the ownership he had denied, was now the reason he was bankrupt. The Amethyst Hotel chain, which he thought was owned by some faceless corporate entity, was the instrument of his downfall. He thought he saw a man begging for $5. He saw an opportunity to practice casual dominance. He never saw the owner holding the keys to his entire world. Later that evening, the reports came in. Sterling and Sons stocks were halted, crashing 70% in after-hours trading. Union Trust was issuing careful statements about market volatility. It was done. The financial destruction was complete. I walked back to the suite, the one where the entire confrontation began. I stood by the window, looking out over the city lights, over the vastness I controlled. I felt the weariness of the fight, the emotional drain of having to prove my humanity and my worth simultaneously. But the fear was gone. The humiliation was redeemed. There was just one final thing left to address. The physical assault was witnessed. The consequences needed to extend beyond the spreadsheet. I needed to ensure that this public act of violence had a public, unavoidable consequence. I instructed Sarah to prepare the CCTV footage, not for the press yet, just for the district attorney. The legal hammer was still waiting to fall, and I intended to wield it. No mercy, not this time. Mr. Sterling's face was the color of old ash. His panic was almost beautiful. He tried to speak, but his mouth just made pathetic little clicks. The security chief, Marcus, stood ready. His eyes were wide, but focused only on my next command. "Marcus," I said, my voice low, "Mr. Sterling's reservation is terminated, effective immediately." Sterling finally found his voice. It was a wheezing, desperate sound. "Elias, wait! Mr. Thorne, please, this is a misunderstanding. I didn't know." I held up a single hand, stopping him cold. "You knew exactly who you thought I was, Mr. Sterling. That is the issue." I glanced at the cheek where his disgusting hand had landed. The staff watched silently. They had seen this injustice before, but they had never seen this reversal of power. "You didn't hit a driver, Mr. Sterling. You didn't hit a servant. You hit the owner of this entire chain." Sterling took a shaky step toward me. His bravado was gone, replaced by naked fear. He was realizing the price of his arrogance. "My apologies are sincere, Elias. We can discuss this business deal. I have contracts pending with Thorne Corp. We can still work together." He still didn't understand. This was not about a business deal. I walked past him toward the entrance of the lobby. The air was thick with tension. "Marcus," I called out, not looking back at Sterling, "ensure all of Mr. Sterling's access cards are immediately deactivated." Marcus moved instantly. Sterling stumbled after me. "No, wait. The acquisition, the West Coast properties. We're closing the deal today. Hundreds of millions of dollars." I stopped at the marble check-in desk, where the poor clerk who had witnessed the slap now stared at the floor, trembling. I looked at the clerk. "Thank you for your professionalism," I murmured. Then I turned back to Sterling. My smile was cold and absolute. "The deal is cancelled, Mr. Sterling, effective 120 seconds ago." His jaw dropped. He looked physically ill. "You can't do that. That's months of negotiation. It's binding." "My contract gives me the final say on all partnerships," I reminded him softly, "and my corporate legal team is already filing the necessary papers citing unacceptable conduct, reputational risk, and physical assault on a senior executive." I leaned closer, ensuring only he and Marcus heard the next words. "You put your hands on me, Mr. Sterling. In this business, that is an act of war." The realization finally, fully dawned on him. The business was over. His reputation was scorched. He was ruined. He tried to plead. "Elias, I need this. My board will destroy me. Think of my family." The mention of family was the final straw. He hadn't thought of anyone's family when he lashed out with such casual cruelty. "Think of your family," I repeated. "Did you think of my family when you decided I was less than human because of the uniform I wore and the color of my skin?" My voice rose, steady now, carrying through the grand lobby. "Did you think of my grandmother, who cleaned hotel rooms for 40 years just so I could stand here today? Did you think of the dignity she deserved, that I deserve, that every single employee in this building deserves?" Silence answered me. Every head in the lobby was bowed, but listening intently. "The answer is no," I stated clearly, "because you didn't see a person. You saw a prop, a convenience, a background character you could humiliate for sport." I looked at Marcus. "Escort Mr. Sterling to his room. Give him 10 minutes to retrieve his essentials. Then escort him to the curb." Sterling became enraged, thrashing against Marcus's immediate grasp. "You will regret this. Elias, I will sue you. I will destroy Thorne Corp." I simply nodded to Marcus. Marcus, a mountain of quiet competence, handled the resistance easily. And Marcus, I added, pausing the proceedings, when he is on the curb, contact every partner we share with Sterling's venture. Inform them precisely why we terminated our relationship. I didn't need to elaborate. The message was clear. Mr. Sterling was toxic. As they dragged him, screaming threats and denials, Sterling locked eyes with me one last time. The look of pure, agonizing loss in his eyes was the closest I would ever come to true satisfaction. It wasn't just the money, it was the public shame. The final, irreversible fall from grace he brought entirely upon himself. I stood there for a long moment, the sudden quiet heavy around me. The young clerk approached me cautiously. "Sir, Mr. Thorne?" "Yes," I answered, running a hand through my short hair. "What about the hotel keys? Do you need a new set?" I looked at the keys that represented hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of employees, and the culmination of decades of labor. "No," I said, picking up the elegant heavy brass key to the penthouse suite I had intended to stay in. I was the owner. I needed no key to enter my own house. I looked out the vast window, down onto the city that had once tried to crush me. The sting of the slap was already fading, but the memory of his assumption, his casual dehumanization, would remain. I had built this empire to ensure men like Sterling never had the power to make me feel small again. I didn't just fire a bad client. I redeemed a lifetime of indignity. 3 minutes? That's all the time it took for the driver to become the executioner. I straightened my subtle, expensive suit. I had a phone call to make to my lawyers. The West Coast properties Sterling had been so desperate to acquire. They were mine, ready for a new vision. A better, fairer one. My work here was not finished. It had just begun. I still had a hotel to run, and I still had countless lessons to teach men who thought their wealth bought them permission to mistreat those they deemed beneath them. I pocketed the penthouse key, feeling the cold weight of absolute control. Let them talk. Let the rumors fly. The next time a wealthy patron thought about raising a hand to serve his staff, they would remember the ruin of Mr. Sterling. This was not justice for me alone. This was a warning etched in granite.